Rain stitched silver threads across the glow of the porch light as I slowed my car near their house, headlights cutting through the drizzle. I didn't pull into the driveway. I didn't even roll down the window. On the front step sat a single plate wrapped in foil, perched like an offering or a dismissal, already spotted with rain. My portion, left outside like a takeout order, waiting for me to collect it without stepping inside. A stray dog sniffed at the edges, drawn to the faint steam of turkey and gravy. Its nose pressed where mine should have been welcome. The sight hit harder than any slammed door. I sat behind the wheel, wipers squeaking, my hands frozen on the steering wheel. It wasn't fury that rose in me, not the kind that shouts or breaks things. No, this was something quieter and sharper, a loneliness that cut down to the bone. To be remembered with scraps after decades of giving everything felt colder than being forgotten. I realized in that moment they hadn't excluded me by accident. They had orchestrated my absence and left proof of it glistening in the rain.
My name is Evelyn Hart, 69 years old last April. I'm the kind of woman who still balances her checkbook every Sunday afternoon and writes thank you notes in real ink, because some courtesies are worth keeping alive. Old habits cling tighter than people think. My neighbors call me reliable. My friends, what few are left, call me stubborn. Maybe both are true. That morning, I was standing in my kitchen, measuring flour for a pie crust, the window fogged faintly with November chill, when the phone buzzed across the counter. My daughter's name lit the screen, Nora. I smiled instinctively before I answered, setting it to speaker so I could keep stirring. But her voice wasn't warm. It was clipped, rehearsed, almost trembling with someone else's authority. "Mom," she began, "don't come to harvest dinner this year, not until you apologize to Caleb." At first, I thought I'd misheard her, my hand stilled over the mixing bowl, spoon hanging heavy in the air. Apologize? To Caleb? The words rearranged themselves in my head, and the room seemed to shrink around me. From the background, I caught the sound of plinking plates, muffled laughter, the rustle of family already gathered at a table I'd help pay for. I asked, as evenly as I could, "Apologize for what, exactly?" "For embarrassing him at brunch. You were out of line." Brunch. 3 weeks ago. I had asked Caleb politely how his coaching business was faring since I hadn't seen a single tax form connected to the investment I'd loaned them. He had smiled thinly, changed the subject, and Nora had followed his lead. Apparently, that was my crime. Asking a question. I turned the speaker off, set the phone face down, and stood in a silence so sharp it felt like glass.
That night, the house hummed with the same stillness it always carried when no one else was inside. The only sound was the refrigerator, clicking and breathing in its steady rhythm. I sat at the kitchen table with my old laptop open, its glow spilling across the room like a confession waiting to be heard. For years, I had signed checks, clicked Pay Now, and set up auto drafts without thinking twice. It was love in the form of convenience, I told myself. But as the spreadsheet began to fill, line after line, the truth unrolled in front of me like a story I'd been too loyal to read. Mortgage payments, every month, drawn from my account, though the deed had my daughter and her husband's names. Transfers to Cedar Peak Consulting, Caleb's business, if you could call it that. The family phone plan, still billed through me. Even their streaming accounts, grocery carts, utilities, all neatly tethered to my name. It wasn't malice that kept it going. It was momentum.
The quiet kind of dependence that seeps in so slowly, you stop noticing where generosity ends and obligation begins. I had kept their lives stitched together with invisible thread. Bills paid, lights kept on, late fees avoided. My eyes drifted to the sideboard, where a framed photo of Thomas, my late husband, sat grinning with a fishing rod, sunlight splintering behind him. You'd laugh. They still think money appears by magic. The words cracked in my throat before bitterness could finish them. I typed another line into the ledger, the numbers stacking higher, colder. Each entry wasn't just money spent. It was a memory of when I'd said yes because I was afraid of what might happen if I ever said no.
The more I scrolled, the more a pattern emerged, one I had refused to admit while I was inside it. Every line in the ledger was a little rescue dressed as just this once. I remembered the first time vividly. Nora's voice on the phone, thin and panicked. "Mom, the startup's over. We can't make payroll. Please, just this once." I had wired enough to keep the lights on. I told myself it was temporary, that good parents help their children get started. But once became a rhythm. When Caleb miscalculated his quarterly taxes, there was a $4,000 penalty. He came to me red-faced, Nora quiet at his side. "Just this once," they said. I paid. Then came the mortgage application. "We just need a co-signer for 1 year tops. You'll barely notice it." I agreed. That year turned into 3. Every month, my account quietly carried the weight of their roof. Each memory returned with its corresponding transaction, like ghosts marching across the screen. I had told myself I was keeping their family safe, but what I was really keeping was their illusion that stability came without sacrifice, that money had no source, no backbone, no end. Somewhere between generosity and guilt, I had lost the boundary between help and enabling. What started as love had twisted into silence, because if I spoke up, I was accused of making things difficult. The cursor blinked at me, merciless, as if daring me to keep ignoring the truth. 3 years of rescues disguised as kindness. 3 years of being the invisible scaffold under someone else's house. I leaned back, staring at the spreadsheet glowing in the dark. The numbers didn't lie, even if I had. Morning came with the dull gray sky and the bitter comfort of strong coffee. I sat at the table, the ledger still open from the night before, its rows of numbers staring back at me like a jury that had already reached its verdict. For years, I had told myself, next month I'll step back, next bill I'll make them take over. But the truth was, I never did. Fear kept me on the hook. Fear of their anger, fear of being shut out, fear of being unnecessary. But as the clock ticked into Monday, a new thought lodged itself inside me, small but steady. If not now, then never. I dialed Maple Hollow Savings, fingers trembling only once before I steadied them. The menu options dragged, violins looping endlessly on hold. Then, a young woman's voice. "Thank you for calling. This is Casey. How can I help you?" I surprised myself with how calm I sounded. I'd like to remove myself as the primary payer on a joint mortgage account, effective immediately. There was a pause, the kind people make when they're sure they've misheard. "Ma'am, are you certain?" "Yes," I said. "Send confirmation when it's done." I wrote down the reference number, underlined it twice in my notebook. The ink pressed hard into the paper, as if carving the decision into permanence. Next came the credit card extension. Another hold tone, another polite voice asking if I was sure I wanted to close Caleb's secondary card. I smiled, though she couldn't see it. "I'm sure.
Everyone will now manage their own balance. By noon, I was at the cell phone store. The clerk, barely old enough to rent a car, blinked when I declined to be the recovery contact on Nora and Caleb's numbers. So, if they get locked out of their accounts, they'll figure it out, I answered, almost gently. Every click, every confirmation email, every pen stroke felt like a rope loosening around my chest. I hadn't realized how heavy the silence of obligation had become until I finally put it down. For the first time in years, the day felt entirely mine.
By Thursday morning, my phone looked less like a lifeline and more like an alarm bell. 25 missed calls, 4 voicemails, a dozen texts flashing across the screen like sirens in red. Each one carried the same panic I had once rushed to soothe. I didn't listen at first. The kettle was whistling, and I poured the boiling water over my tea leaves as if nothing had changed. For decades, every crisis that involved my daughter or Caleb demanded immediate attention, like a fire I alone could extinguish. But that morning, I let the phone vibrate itself against the counter, rattling against the wood like something alive. I watched the steam curl up from my mug and waited until the kitchen grew still again. Finally, curiosity tugged me closer. I tapped play. Nora's voice burst through the speaker, sharp and frantic. "Mom, the mortgage bounced. Are you trying to ruin us? The bank's calling. Caleb's furious. What did you do?" The second message was softer, thinner. "I just need to know why you do this. You could have talked to me first." The third was pleading, almost childlike. "We can fix it, okay? Please, call me." Her words ricocheted around the tiled kitchen, echoing off walls that had once held holiday laughter. For a moment, they almost cracked something inside me. Almost. But I had spent too many years mistaking panic for love, too many years interpreting their emergencies as evidence that I was needed. This wasn't love, it was dependence, and I had finally stepped away. I pressed the phone face down on the counter and slipped into my coat. Outside, Maple Hollow was bright with late autumn sunlight, leaves gathered in copper piles, the air sharp with the scent of rain-washed earth. My neighbor, Mrs. Hollander, waved from across the street. "You're out early today, Evelyn. Everything all right?" I smiled, a small, steady smile she couldn't quite understand. "Everything is finally catching up." I walked on, letting the rhythm of my steps drown out the memory of my daughter's voice. For once, the silence didn't hurt. It felt like permission. That evening, when the house grew too heavy with silence, I drove into town. The drizzle had eased into a mist, wrapping Maple Hollow in a silver haze. Neon glowed ahead, the flickering sign of Millie's Diner, a place Thomas and I had once stopped at after long drives home from the lake. The sight of it tugged something in me I hadn't felt in years, nostalgia without bitterness. I pushed open the door, the little brass bell jingling overhead. The air smelled of coffee, frying onions, and something sweet cooling on the counter. I chose a booth by the window, the vinyl seat cracked but warm from the heater blowing beneath it. For once, I wasn't seated at a table waiting for anyone. I was there for myself. The waitress, no older than 30, came over with a pot of coffee. Her tired eyes brightened with practiced kindness. "Evening. Family not cooking tonight?" she asked with a half smile. I hesitated, then returned the smile, small, careful. "They had other plans." She nodded, not prying, and poured the coffee until steam curled up in a fragrant cloud between us. I ordered a slice of pecan pie, the kind I used to bake every Thanksgiving when the house was full of voices and clatter. When the plate arrived, I took my time, fork tapping lightly against the crust. The sweetness lingered on my tongue, but it was the warmth of the coffee that settled deeper, uncoiling something knotted inside me. Around me, the diner hummed with ordinary life. 2 truckers laughing at a joke, a young couple sharing fries, the cook clattering pans in the back. Nobody here expected me to rescue them
or explain myself, or apologize for asking questions. I was just another customer, sipping coffee while the rain traced lines down the glass. For the first time in years, I realized that quiet could taste better than tradition. And sitting there in Millie's diner, with steam rising from my mug, I wasn't empty. I was free.
2 nights later, a message from Caleb lit up my phone. "Please come over. Nora's not doing well." I almost ignored it. Almost. Old instincts die hard. Curiosity, or perhaps that stubborn trace of maternal reflex, pushed me into my coat and out the door. Their house looked smaller than I remembered. The porch light flickered weakly, fighting against the fog. Envelopes leaned against the doorframe, unopened, like a paper fortress of denial. When Caleb opened the door, his charm was stripped down to exhaustion. His shoulders slumped, his eyes ringed dark. "Thank you for coming," he said quietly. "We didn't know what else to do." Inside, the air smelled of stale coffee and anxiety. Nora sat at the kitchen counter, hair unbrushed, scrolling her phone as if salvation might appear on the screen. She didn't look up. I placed the leather binder I'd brought on the table and unzipped it slowly. The sound tore through the silence like a blade. Pages of records, transactions, and notes fanned out across the surface. Mortgage payments, utilities, business bailouts. 3 years of rescues laid bare. "These," I said, sliding the binder toward them, "are the records. Every bill I've covered, every dollar I've wired, from your mortgage to your internet bill. 3 years of it." Nora's eyes flicked to the pages, confusion shifting quickly to dread. You kept all this?" "I kept us," I replied evenly. "You banned me from Thanksgiving until I apologized, so I stopped paying for the dinner I wasn't invited to." Her mouth fell open. "You're punishing us." I met her gaze, steady and unflinching. "No, I'm ending a mistake." Caleb rubbed his forehead, muttering something about misunderstandings and temporary setbacks. His voice was thin now, stripped of its practiced confidence. "This isn't revenge," I said, turning the binder so they could see it clearly. "It's clarity. You wanted independence. Now you have it." Nora's voice broke, fragile as tissue. "We didn't realize it was this much." "No," I said softly. "You didn't want to realize. You just wanted me to keep fixing what you refused to face." The kitchen fell into silence, heavy and electric, like a courtroom after the verdict has been read. I stood, smoothing my coat. "Everything you need is in that binder. Every login, every instruction. You're adults. Act like it." Then I walked out, before guilt could claw its way back in. When I got home that night, fog clung to the ridge like a veil, curling around the porch lamp in soft halos of light. I hung my coat by the door and stood in the silence, letting it wrap around me. For once, the quiet didn't feel empty. It felt earned. On my desk sat an old photograph, me and my first boss, Marjorie Ames, at the Raleigh accounting firm. Marjorie had been sharp-eyed and fearless, a woman who could dismantle a ledger like a surgeon with a scalpel. I remembered her words as clearly as if she were standing there beside me. "A boundary isn't cruelty, Evelyn. It's love with a spine." Back then, in my 20s, I thought it sounded clinical, almost cold. But now, after 3 years of silent rescues and a kitchen table stacked with other people's bills, I understood. A boundary wasn't a wall to shut people out. It was a doorframe you could stand in, tall and steady, and decide who and what you let through. I walked to the window. Outside, the street lamps blinked on one by one, steady beacons against the fog. The city moved as it always had. Cars in the distance, dogs barking, lives being lived. Nobody out there knew that inside this small house, a woman had just untangled herself from years of invisible chains. I pressed my hand against the cool glass and let the realization settle in. My life was finally my own. Not tethered by guilt, not measured by what I could give,
not defined by what they demanded. For the first time in decades, my balance sheets matched my conscience. Both read the same simple word: enough. And as the fog rolled across the hills, I felt something I hadn't in years. Not fear, not grief, but a quiet strength rising in my chest. Love had built my family, yes, but now boundaries would be the beams that kept me standing. I turned off the lights and let the house rest in darkness. The silence wasn't brittle anymore. It was wide, breathable, alive, and in it, I could finally hear my own heartbeat.
By early spring, the fog that had clung to the hills finally lifted. The air smelled of damp earth and new beginnings, the kind of mornings where sunlight stretched across the porch in long, golden fingers. For the first time in years, I wasn't waking up with the weight of someone else's bills in my head. The only numbers on my desk belonged to me: pension, savings, donations I chose freely. A new binder sat neatly labeled Home Budget 2025. Every column balanced, every line mine alone. But numbers weren't the only thing I wanted to rebuild. My hands itched for something living. One Saturday afternoon, I opened the garden shed, brushed the dust from an old spade, and knelt by the fence. From a small paper packet, I poured out a handful of morning glory seeds. Tiny, unassuming, hard as little stones, yet filled with the promise of beauty. I pressed each one gently into the soil, whispering as I went, "Grow, take root, climb higher than I expect." Dirt clung to my fingertips, and for once the mess didn't feel like a burden. It felt like creation. That evening, my phone buzzed with a single message from Nora. I didn't realize it was that bad. "I'm sorry." I stared at the words until they blurred, then set the phone down without answering. Some things don't need replies. They need time. Seeds don't bloom the day they're planted. Neither do people. Weeks later, green tendrils began curling up the fence, small and stubborn, reaching for sunlight. I'd check them each morning with my tea in hand, marveling at how something once hidden could insist on becoming beautiful. On my table sat a wooden box of old recipe cards, corners smudged with flour and thyme. Most were written in Nora's childish scrawl: pumpkin pie, apple butter, Thanksgiving rolls. Once, those recipes had felt like chains to holidays where love was measured by labor. Now, as I traced a faded fingerprint on the pie card, the ache that used to follow her name no longer cut sharp. It had softened into something quieter: acceptance. Maybe even forgiveness. I closed my eyes as the breeze rustled through the fence, stirring the morning glories. Their blossoms turned toward the light, resilient and unafraid. Love had built us. Boundaries would keep me standing. And for the first time in years, I wasn't afraid of what came next.